The next scenario that I want to do with you is the documentation scenario. Okay. Again, please feel free to follow along with me as we go through this. So let's assume here for this case that I have a workstation on wheels in the hallway, and I've just done an assessment on a patient, and I'm in the hallway with at my workstation on wheels station, and I'm entering that assessment into the patient record. Okay, and the PDA alarm's in my pocket at that moment. So let's code this together. So when the PDA alarms, our previous location we're going to say is the patient room. Our current location is a documentation server. Remember, we're standing at the workstation on wheels, even though we're in the hallway. Okay, we're actually at this documentation server. So I'm going to click for current location, documentation server. All right, so the documentation key is in column F. One thing I want to tell you about column F is that everything in column F has sub-activities. So in this case, when I select documentation, I'm going to get a sub-activity list. And here I see in my sub-activity list a daily assess or an assessment documentation event. So I'm going to go ahead and select daily assess. And that concludes my data entry. Okay. The third scenario that I want to review with you is a scenario in which the nurse is in the hallway communicating with a doctor. And in this scenario, the nurse has basically been working with the patient in the patient room, and the care team is outside of in the hallway, and so the nurse leaves the patient bedside and goes out into the hallway and is talking to the doctor when the PDA alarms in the nurse's pocket. Okay, so at this point in time, let's code this together. So the previous location we're going to say again is the patient room. The current location, since the nurse is in the hallway, actually is on the unit. So we're going to code this as on the unit for current location. And in this case, the nurse is meeting or communicating with a part of the care team. So we're going to come up here and select communication. And first option there is communicating with the care team. So we'll select that option. And worker assignment, we're going to say that the nurse had to do this because they're the ones that needed to do the communication. So we'll say RN required. Okay. At this point in time, I want you to take just a minute and experiment with various other scenarios on your own. You can pause this training. And if you're taking this with a group, you can go ahead and look at a bunch of different scenarios, walk through them, and talk about how you would categorize those. All right, what I'd like to do next is I'm going to walk you through the end of the study, the end of the shift procedure for the nurse. So the first thing that the nurse is going to do once they are ready to clock out, they'll stop their study. To do that, the nurse will hit this red square right here. Okay. Once they touch the red square, I want you to follow along with me. Go ahead with your stylus and touch that red square. The PDA will ask you if you want to terminate a study. You're going to say yes. And the last question that for the nurse is what's the average census for the day for the nurse. And in this case, this number is typically your staffing ratio. Okay, so if you have a 5-to-1 staffing ratio, typically a nurse will enter this staffing ratio. However, if the nurse did start the day, let's say that the staffing ratio is 5-to-1 and the nurse started the day with 5 patients, and throughout the day they discharged 2, and then they admitted 2 more. Technically, they could say that the average staff census was 4. But in this case, most of your nurses, the average census for them will be around 5. Once you've entered that, hit the next button. Okay, and at this point in time, the PDA the study is complete for the nurse, and they need to plug the PDA into the charger, and at that point in time, the nurse can go home. All right, that pretty much concludes the procedures that nurses are going to go through in using the device. The last thing I want to talk to you about now is the process of moving the PDA out of the training mode and back into the study mode so that you're ready to actually give it to a nurse. All right, let's go through that again. That procedure, by the way, is in the documentation on page 29. So if you have a question after the training class, you can always refer back to the documentation on page 29 to see this procedure. All right, to do this, what we're going to do is we're going to go down to the menu button down here at the bottom and push that menu button. When the menu button comes up, the select configuration option will be the first selection under File. Go ahead and select that. Okay. And our study configuration is the first slot, so I want you to select the first slot. Okay, and when you're done, hit the OK button. At this point in time, the PDA is ready to actually give to a nurse in the study configuration. All right, again, my name is Nelson Lee. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to call me. You can contact me using the phone number and email address on the documentation. Thanks again. Bye.